Hello everyone and welcome to my oil painting class. And today we are painting coastal flowers. And we've got a beautiful Scottish coast with some beautiful light, kind of warm rocks, offset by some of the darker patterns of the rocks as well, and some darker mountains in the distance. And there's some cooler mountains in the distance. So the uh, aim for today is to try to have establish a focal point on our flowers and how we can reach that. Yeah, so we can have stronger contrasts, softer contrasts on the background. We can have clear, sharper edges, maybe for the stalk, some of the petals, some of the light and darks of the petals, and which maybe less clear edges and maybe smudges and maybe more lost. Some of our mountains might get more lost within the skies and clouds. Thicker use of thicker paint, some chunky strokes of impasto application of paint where we're almost sculpting some of the petals in comparison to much more runnier, less thick layers again for the middle ground, for the background. Sharper colors, yeah, maybe using some more of a range of colors, especially where we can pick up some of the pinks and lovely greens, maybe some of the mosses of the on the rock right behind our flowers. So some of those intensity of colors could be stronger. When at the back we can have more muted colors, more paler blues, lesser of a bolder or less in saturation, okay, for the colors. I picked up a gray background, kind of a medium darkness for the background, because we have loads of cooler colors today, usually painting the sea, the water, the rocks. The gray will support us lovely through different stages. Now, on my palette, I have a group of cool colors and a group of warm colors. So here's my white. I have blue-gray if you have it. Don't worry if you don't. We can use our ultramarine and a bit of black, Payne's gray, and with some white, and we'll get a blue-gray. Cerulean blue, emerald green, and ultramarine. Okay. And from the warm colors, we have buff titanium. Again, if you don't have it, we can mix it from ochre and violet with some white. But those two colors pre-mixed, sometimes quite nice to use with a straight paint application, okay? Or as a buffer to our colors. Right, so I've got buff titanium, yellow ochre, rose madder, or any other pink, pinkish type of color, pinky purplish color. So cadmium red will be more orangey red, okay? Alizarian crimson will be close to this. Yeah, anything purpley. I've got rose madder. Deep violet, and also I've got Payne's grey, so it's more of a cooler black. Now, looking at our scale of tones, if we were to plan most light and most dark tones, if we were to pick up our first three lights and the last three darks, where would they be? So I'm squinting my eyes looking at my photographs. Black and white photographs sometimes helps us to identify it as well. So probably the sky, possibly including some of the mountains there, those more distant. I think we've got one of the islands there. This light group of rocks, there might be subdivisions, might some borders between 3 and 4 in darkness, so it kind of still reads as a big shape of light. And some flower heads as well, they stand out really well against the greens. Okay, so what's going to be our most dark areas? Those are going to be our rocks here in the middle, our distant rocks, but they will be softer with edges, so the focal point stays here on our flowers. Our greens, those stalks and leaves and little leaves, almost like little cups, and our flowers will have quite dark mark as well. Okay. Everything else, the water, well, mainly the water is left, will be kind of more medium darkness. Okay. There will be loads of crossing of our lights to darks through that medium darkness, but overall our medium probably is going to stay in the water. Okay, so if we were to think about those shapes, what's going to be the lightest one, what's going to be the darkest one, it might be easier for us to draw the layout of our composition. Right, I'm going to use a bit of tips, my round brush, and because we have a lot of cooler colors and we're painting on top of the gray, I'm going to use some ultramarine and some Payne's gray as a diluted version. So I'm almost getting an indigo. So if you do have an indigo, that could have been another option. Okay, so this is just runny paint for my sketching. I'm going to identify the line of horizon, how much sky we're going to have, including those rocky mountains. So sometimes if it appears too dark, you can always dilute your paint a little bit more and maybe have a paler layer. Okay, I think that might be a bit easier. I think it's actually more wet oil, which gives me a very dark line than actual darkness of paint. Right, next I'm going to plan approximately the size of my flowers as a big shape. Just looking at the tops of the flower heads. So we almost start here on the right, just looking for the tallest one here. That's maybe a group coming this way. So I'm almost hugging it with my lines. It goes perhaps tiny over the middle. So if this is my middle of the picture, okay. So this is my middle of the picture. So they go much over that. So that's my middle, much over. Okay, somewhere here. Now this is an overall, almost like a bouquet, big shape, big silhouette. Okay, we can subdivide it's more into individual flowers after. Right, let's find a group of darker rocks. Maybe how far do we want to keep that lighter block of the rocks as well? If I were to divide it halfway through between the horizon, yeah, that gives me that space, maybe a little bit shorter, so somewhere here, maybe a little more of a diagonal where the lighter rocks meet darker rock or group of rocks. Okay, I'm gonna find that maybe shape, that silhouette. Okay. Now, because we're painting a landscape, we can move things about. We're not doing any architectural elements today, as we've been doing recently. So we can adjust and move things about to what works for our painting. That might be even going behind my flowers somewhere there. Okay. I quite enjoy that paler layer. So maybe I'll continue using more diluted color. Okay, next. So we've got one group, sky, everything else, yeah? Big group of flowers. What's else on the left? Next, let's have a look. What's above our horizon? It's quite a small rocky formation of the cliffs going up. I might just exaggerate their size, otherwise they will be tiny, tiny, tiny. So I'm gonna just exaggerate them a little bit, and then they will start rising up and almost reaching out the top of our painting. Okay. And in the distance, we can find maybe a slightly darker mountain. Feel free to, again, exaggerate slightly the size. Okay, we've got slightly darker mountain and another group. I think there were, can't remember, there was, I thought that there were Isle of Skye, those, the Cullings, the mountains in Isle of Skye, but I think there was another island. So something similar there. Again, that's going to be all quite softly painted, lost and found borders. Just done like peaks and borders linking together. So that might be there. That might be a little bit above it. Okay. Next, we'll have a look at direction of our lighter rocks. We've possibly seen the surface of the rock where the flower's growing, okay? And then behind it, there's a bit of a distance. So we see similar type of rocks, but further away. So I quite like that almost diagonal view, diagonal development here as well. So it's also invites us into painting. Okay, this is all run quite a lot. I might make it slightly darker, this rocky shape. Okay, so that is the exciting diagonal. There's some patterns of seaweed, or sorry, the mosses, maybe some seaweed as well, but I actually can't see any. So that's will be kind of developing that direction. Okay, so we'll start as a viewer, start to come in from the bottom left corner. We're going to start following some of the verticals of the flowers, flower stems and the flower heads. We'll start kind of following that pattern of them being on the side here and maybe going on the top, following our mountains and hopefully descending by the darker rock and staying somewhere here within the water, kind of more bringing our swirl to the outer layer of the flowers. So maybe we'll follow more of the inner layer of that bunch of flowers. Now for the flowers, if we were to start sketching them now, we're going to have loads of dark marks and the flowers could be spoiled by darker paint. So my suggestion, first of all, if we were to change the color, if we were to add a bit of violet to our paint, violet and Payne's gray, if you had enough, quite a lot of blue in your mixture, maybe just a bit of violet. And I want to use a little bit of guidance for our flowers. So instead of drawing every individual one, what about if we were to find almost that entrance where some of those flowers going to steady away before they start turning, quite like the little groups of flowers somewhere here. Okay, maybe another group somewhere here, almost just finding a little bit of the boundary of how they will start developing here. Okay, so if I were to again to group them up, what I also want to find is an approximate size of a flower head. So if I were to draw one of the larger ones at the front, larger because it's closer to us, not because it's more mature than other ones are smaller, okay? So that might be one of my flowers here. So when I start painting, I'm not going to suddenly go into tiny little dabs, okay? There might be smaller dabs to show some of the flowers at the back of each other, but overall, they will be reasonably big. We can also find maybe a medium size or the most kind of small, not maybe not the smallest one, but on that height and that distance, what will be the size? Maybe somewhere about there. Okay, it's taking almost the height from the horizon to the edge of the mountain. That tall individual flower there. Okay, gives us that again reference point. Maybe another flower, quite like this one standing out. So it gives me, that's maybe the smaller one. This is maybe the larger one. So anything in between, approximately somewhere there. Okay. Good. I will paint the rest of the flowers straight away with color instead of doing the every shape. Again, maximum what we can do is to find a little bit of, those darker bases of the flowers. Sometimes having a little bit of darkness before we paint some highlights is good as well. So I might just test couple, well, not couple, but a small amount of flowers. I'm not gonna copy them all. I'm gonna have more of a suggestion of how they might be present. Okay, maybe some of the key shapes here. Maybe actually I might need to go a bit further here. Maybe somewhere here. Maybe these two a little bit further down. I'm mainly looking how my picture adjusts to the elements I'm introducing. And if we need to paint an extra flower head somewhere here to balance that entry point, yeah? Or if we need to bring another flower head a little bit further out, just to have that introduction and bringing it across. That would be great. If something we want to exclude, we can exclude it. If we wanted to add, we can add it as the painting develops, okay? Okay, I think there might be another one somewhere here. Maybe it will be less significant in light, but something will be exciting to see. Okay, in this area. I think these ones I might plan with my lighter color. Lovely. And this my sketch will be finished. So we're planning not just individual elements, we're planning the whole composition together because everything is influenced by the lines we bring. Right, so because we have a medium darkness background, so that's between 4 and 6, that kind of medium darkness, we can all paint with our most darker tones, any of this range, or we can paint with our lighter group, any of this range. We tend to start somewhere here for the lights and then make it lighter, and then we tend to start somewhere here for the darks and then make it extra darker, okay, or move things about. Right, so because we already have got our gray, and we already have a little bit of dark from our line, I'd like to start with our highlights. I really want to get going with our flowers, but just for practical reasons, let's start with the sky. So then we're not going to smudge into our flowers too much by accident. So let's get some oil. So I've got my 3 oils mixture here. Okay, let's get some white. Okay. I'm gonna go um, a, mm, the viscosity kind of the paint. Um, Not overly runny, but I don't want the paint to be too thick. So it's nice and soft. Sorry, it's hard for you to see what's happening to my paint here. I'm just softening my white first. And I'm gonna go for cerulean blue. Okay. And before paint the sky, I think this cerulean blue will be a good color for maybe tiny bit of ultramarine here as well. Okay, that's quite a lot. That's if my paint is a little too oily, a little bit too runny, I'm going to wipe my brush. I think that's what's happened to me, and have some thicker white. I think I have picked up quite a lot of moisture from oil. Okay, so there's a bit of cerulean blue, and there is a bit of ultramarine in this. I think ultramarine is gently dominating. Right, it looks like this could be a good color for me. Now, placing it on my gray background should tell me if this is, if my blue is appearing lighter, I'm on the right track. If it appears the same or darker, I've overdone it. So, this is going to be my big block for the distant mountains. Another local island with its beauties. If your paint is a little bit transparent, that's fine. We'll see just extra grays around. Sometimes we run out of paint and we just have to top it up so the paint spreads a little thinner. So that's okay. That's where the gray supports us. I'm going to put a tiny bit more of that paint across. I can smudge into my darker lines as well. That will partially give me a nice subtone. Partially will just prepare the surface for my lighter clouds behind it. Okay, right, I'm gonna go for slightly darker ultramarine. There is a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of a darker edge. Now, ultramarine on its own might be a little bit too bright. And remember what we said, to keep a focal point at the front, one of the points was to keep the color bright and bolder at the front. So the colors at the back would be slightly, slightly duller. So instead of direct ultramarine, I'm going to add a small amount of Payne's Gray, which made my color darker. I don't want it to be over dark, so I can just add a bit more white. So I'm getting it from extra darker to about here somewhere. Yeah, to slowly add in more white. Okay, I don't want it to be gray, so it's a fine balance to keep the color closer to ultramarine, but not a fresh ultramarine. And I'm just slowly bringing it down to maybe a 3 or 4 in darkness. Maybe tiny, tiny bit more again. Okay, let's give that one a go. Okay, it doesn't stand out against my darker, sorry, my initial blue. So let's give tiny, stronger darkness here. Okay, just need to dull it down with Payne's Gray, something in between. So when we know what we're aiming for, or approximately aiming for the tone, or approximately what color we enjoy and see there, but why it can't be so bold, that's half of the battle there. Okay, and what I've done now, I just touched the border of this slightly darker mountain, and they smudged with my paler blue one at the back. That's partially it's reflecting here as well. Okay. Okay, that should be enough. I'm also seeing this color while I have it on my brush. Just a little bit for the water, for the sea, somewhere where some of the darker rocks could be under the water. So I might, just for a reference point and connection, I just put a little bit of that color across. It's a very gentle diagonal instead of a horizontal line. Might be just that rocks, how they stay under the water. Maybe just a little reference somewhere in the back. Maybe a little bit too thick lines, but they will go. Okay, I'm happy with that. Let's wipe my brush and let's do the rest of the sky. Now, for the sky, I can go directly with some fresh white. Now, it's not going to be white. I haven't cleaned my brush perfectly, so that's how I go around. If I don't want perfectly white, that just easy wipe my brush. That's enough. It will clean by picking up some white and softening it with some oil. So I've got just enough white. And my plan is to establish a soft border between my mountains and the sky. So what I'm gonna do first, a little bit sharper border to begin with, so we can just basically see where we're painting. We can smudge it afterwards. If it starts smudging straight away, that's fine. Okay, so I'm just establishing gentle connection between the white clouds and the mountains. Okay. Okay, so I just can see a little bit, otherwise they might get lost in if I were to paint everything slightly similar in darkness. Okay. And I'm going to use a bit of blue-gray. Quick recap, if you don't have blue-gray, you can just use your white. I would have gone for perhaps ultramarine and a little bit of Payne's gray. But I've got a blue-gray and it's already gives me a nice paler grayish border, border of blue and gray together. Okay, maybe a little bit too pale in some places, so I might be able to add small amount of blue to that, but let's see first how it will settle in. Okay, let's make this one a little more softer. Okay. And the little areas of grey are left on my sky. I think that could be a little fresher white. Again, not direct pure white, but I haven't cleaned my brush. I just lifted it up and I'm going to squeeze the little paler strokes, which will get slightly muckier on the surface of the painting as well. So that color is no longer overly fresh, but it gives us a wonderful contrast, a settled contrast. Okay. Now can I use some of that off-white as well here for the top? And it's okay if that white will never materialize as a defined highlight. But somewhere here might be quite nice as well, a little paler color. It might be the mist coming down the mountain. It might be just more of an overcast part of the sky. Okay. And this is when I'm ready to come to my borders of those paler mountains and smudge them together with the sky. So I'm going to clean my brush so it's not going to be overwhelmed with pigment. If you have a lot of extra paint, we can take it off our tissue and reuse it later. So I'm just wiping it off. So it gives me not overly clean brush, but it's not full of chunks of paint. I'm just gonna go alongside my borders and just gently, maybe a slightly bigger stroke, slightly smaller stroke, gently going around the borders and losing those borders tiny bit more. If one color doesn't quite drag nicely, okay, that's quite nice. A tiny little sharpness here and there, it's absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. We just don't want that overall massive contrast. Okay. Opposite, sometimes I want to have a little bit more soft, tiny border contrast, just to not to lose completely this silhouette of whatever we're painting. In our case, it's some mountains. Okay, I will just touch this area because that will be part of the mountains here as well. Okay. Good. Good. And we could do something similar to our lighter rocks at the front, using now warmer colors. Right, so next I'm picking up a fresh brush. So if I need to come back to my blue brush, it's still here. Again, I need a little bit of oil. And I'm going to start, excuse me, instead of direct white, I'm going to go for buff titanium. If you don't have buff titanium, recap, use some fresh white, some ochre, and a small amount of violet. So this is a good buff color, meaning it tops up any light color, especially now a warm direction. Right, so there will be, so in this warm area of the rocks, it doesn't mean that all the colors have to be warm. I will use a little bit of probably cooler colors as well. But as a starting point, let's put some larger strokes of maybe some of the warmer light. Now we don't know exactly where our flower is going to be here. So I'm just going to initially continue a small amount of that rock going into our flowers. Okay, it's going to be behind. Maybe we'll see more of it or less. Okay. I want to see maybe a little more of this light reaching out. I'm not doing anything. There are some specific shapes. At the moment, I'm just going to try to establish that overall lighter color for the front big rock. I'll let the lovely yellow patterns of the mosses. I think it might be seaweed, it might be mosses. It's all kind of that salty environment where these things grow. Right, next I'm going to mix my buff titanium with a small amount of blue-gray. So I'm going to get something in between, that kind of a warmer gray. It's not quite a gray, but it's not that darker gray we just had as a background. Yeah, this is something cooler, but becomes almost of a similar darkness, maybe tiny bit more lighter, almost the same. The more blue-gray I add, slightly darker it might appear. Okay, that's quite nice. Okay, I'm just leaving a little bit of idea of where my flower is going to be. Okay. And there will be a little bit of extra shadows here on our rock, which I'm going to give it a moment and leave it. But while we're enjoying this group of colors from buff titanium to blue-gray and anything in between, I'd like to use it for my little lighter group of rocks, but they're a little bit more broken down. We can see more individual patterns there. So I'm just going to play with my strokes to define approximate texture, approximate feel for that area, yeah? Not quite enough darkness there yet, not quite enough other colors in there, but that's a good starting point. Okay. Now, for our sky and mountains, we painted everything quite simply, quite well together. We can paint all of this area now more detail. We can get some more tones, darker tones. We can get the mosses and extra yellow colors and more subdivision of tone at the back. But I'm gonna choose to stop for now, and I'd like to bring my lighter blocks of flowers. So I want to see how they're going to start interacting together. So again, I'm going just to leave this brush as it is. I'm going to come back to it. And I'm going to pick up a lighter brush. Sorry, lighter, another clean brush. Again, a little bit of oil. And this time I do need extra white. I just need to squeeze extra. Might squeeze some close to me and for later back in the corner. Okay, so I can go for my white. And I'm going to use next my rose madder, my pinky color. Rose madder works really, really well for these particular flowers. Apologies, I don't know the name of them, but they're just most of the coasts you will see them, especially rocky areas. Right, I need to have reasonably thick paint, otherwise my pink might be lost against the darkness of my gray. Right, an initial plan. We want to have a little bit of testing of what the blocks of light as in shapes of flowers is going to be. So I have this big one. So can I just put it as a block? It's not going to be the most light tone. I can still see quite a lot of background color, but I just want to have a little bit of it present and have a little play of adding them as shapes of light. Now, there isn't any particular order which flowers you want to do first, which ones you want to do last. I started with the ones I've drawn, so let's continue with the ones we've drawn. Keeping an eye on the size of the flower so that suddenly don't shrink or become extra large. Okay, and then anywhere we place the bases, that might be a little encouragement for us to get planning. Now, I'm bringing some of that violety color back to my palette. That's okay. So we're smudging, we're lightening things up. So I'm going to keep topping up my white and topping up my magenta, that's not magenta, my rose madder. You could have used magenta, that would be quite nice as well. Okay. Most of the flowers will be overlapping others. So don't just paint them individually. They might start as being painted individually, but then eventually they will start being behind the others. So pick up maybe one flower, which you can see more fully. Okay, and then what can you see behind? Here, I've got a group of flowers, so I can't quite go, okay, this is this and this and this. Okay, I'm just gonna have to trust my uh kind of look. I'm gonna have to step away and kind of look for pattern instead of counting every flower. That's approximately a group. And I'm also looking at the gap before we have any greens. That's a little bit of a boring gap. Can I just narrow it down somewhere here? That might be another flower. So I'm more looking for shapes on the painting than exact flowers as they are. We can always pick up a specific flower to get the character from it. Okay, rather than being too precise. Okay, this is quite nice. Now let's see how it's going to take us here. So maybe this shape is going to be actually my flower. Might make it a little stronger in pink. Okay. I don't like painting flowers when they're very, very much cropped like these ones, or completely ignore it or lift it up. So this flower, I lifted it up much higher here. Yeah, if we wanted another one somewhere here, there might be another one elsewhere. Don't paint it right above it. Yeah, can it be gently moved aside, one side or the other side, doesn't matter. Okay, some of these started to be slightly darker, it doesn't matter. They're a little bit less central, so perhaps less white might be the reason for it as well, taking it slightly out of our focal point. Okay. Again, you can put loads more flowers here, but don't really want to. Don't really will I benefit from it. Okay, I quite like those darker lines because I can smudge into them, the base of my flowers here. Okay, that looks like a bit of a gap here as well. Can we put anything else here? Okay. If it's slightly further away, I'm just putting a tiny bit darker color. Or maybe just more saturated than pink. Might work well there. Okay, I think that's okay. Good. Okay, maybe enough for now. Another one here. It's going to be sticking out too much. Maybe a little bit lower. We'll see. It feels like I could reach out with one flower somewhere here. Still, yeah, I think that's where was my little line for it as well. Or was it a rock? It doesn't matter. I think it might work here. Good. Now we're establishing our lights, but again, we're probably somewhere here to possibly come into 3 to 4. We're somewhere between 2 and 3, coming up to 4 in some of the areas. Okay, and I'm going to add to my flowers a little bit more darkness. We can come back with our highlights after. So if we're working within a group of lights, we always start with a darker version and work towards the lights. So I need some of those more purples, and so maybe even I'm going to go into towards 4. I'm going to go for some violet with my rose madder. Okay, if it looks too purpley, okay, we can tone it down with a small amount of ochre. Okay, becomes slightly warmer to some of the petals being much more older. Okay, this starts partially drying out, but I wanted extra darkness, so I think I first want my violet and maybe even Payne's gray. Okay, that's quite a nice combination here. And because we already have some of the lighter tones in place, I can just use the bottom, kind of almost stroke the lower part of the flowers for some leaves, little scales. Their leaves are their old petals as the flower opens up and just supported by them. Yeah, they just become little cups where the flowers base is. Okay, some will have a bit more sharper than others, some a bit more softer. We said all the sharpness of detail of the stain in the front doesn't mean that every single flower has to have that sharpness. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to, well, we're gonna struggle with too much attention every element. So just see how it comes. Okay, sometimes that grouping of darkness is as good as well. If the darkness dilutes with the volume of light strokes on the painting, I'm going to top up my violet and black. Don't have to be perfect. Quite often they're just hugging that little flower. I think those little leaves are a little more delicate than my strokes, but I don't mind them going bolder first because my other colors maybe will come back and soften that sharpness. So it gives us a strong contrast, this approach of painting extra darker tones. Okay. Okay, because I can wipe my brush, I can start adjusting them. Right, I just clean my brush. So from the effect of plum blossom flowers, which we often paint in Chinese brush painting, we're going to turn them into coastal flowers. So that lovely color we mixed earlier from white, rose madder, and ochre will be a first starting point to get a little extra warmth from, instead of just pink, but that a little bit of ochre. And it will also tame some of the size and roundness of the petals on our flowers. Now, you don't have to be accurate everywhere. We only want to have an impression. So I'm just running out of paint straight away. So I'm just going to mix some more. Okay. So we only want a little bit more of a variety. In some places you might want to go for fresher pink. Nothing wrong with just the pink as well. The more of this orangey red you will add, the more drier all the flowers we will portray. Also just used a bit of buff titanium instead of white. Made sense to kind of to make that connection to the colors as well. Okay, so now I'm going to try to make more elongated petals. Some of those directions will be changing. My main aim is to have those little bases, those darker bases we just painted, a little bit more tamed, less round with its edges. Doesn't mean that they all have to be the same. And another one is that thinner stroke and interpretation of smaller, more independent petals. Okay, there goes layers and layers of those lovely petals here. Keep topping up your paint because you will start lifting unwanted colors. So I keep mixing the color so it appears again and again fresh or fresher. Okay. Again, I don't have to do it everywhere. Similar effect could be reached with other colors, including our pinks. Okay, I think maybe I'll stop there. Now I can wipe my brush. We can use some tabs and get rid of my orangey brick type of color. Okay, because I want to go for more fresh pink and some whites as well. So let's load some thicker paint. Maybe a tiny bit of oil. But let's stay with the thickness of the paint. A bit more rose madder. And my brush has thick paint through the bristles. So once I mix the color, maybe a tiny bit more. Once I mix the color, I'm going to wipe my brush against my palette. If it's not quite fully happens, I'll wipe it on a tissue. If you want extra paint, you can always take it off the tissue and put it back on your palette. But the brush is back to its narrower state. Yeah, it's more accurate now. If we wanted more individual strokes created. So now I can put some paint just on the tip of it. That's when I'll be much more accurate with my strokes and independent petals. Now it feels if I'm using more white, the strokes come out more precise. The more pink I have, the strokes not quite showing themselves through. Paint becomes a little bit pale. I think it's a consistency of the paint itself, the kind of the quality of the paint. Okay, I'm just bringing a little bit of pink, maybe a little thicker. Yeah, that's when the paint is just tiny bit less thick with that extra volume of red. Okay, so I'm trying to leave the paint, not smudge it, or rub it in, but lift it off my palette and almost just apply as a chunk. Okay, so I've got quite a lot of thick paint here. I'm working into my darker reds before the whites will come in. So I'm building up that volume. And again, do I need to do it everywhere? No. The more unifying flowers will appear, the more pattern-like or wallpaper-like appearance they will have, yeah? So if you want to paint them more life, that variety has to be in place at all times. So I'll do a tiny bit more here and maybe stop. Okay, this is a big chunk of darkness, so let's touch that. Right. Now, the last stage of flowers, which I'm going to check out. I'm not going to do it fully. I'm going to give it a little check and see how the contrast will work, how that intensity might will compare with other colors later. So I'm going to go for direct fresh white without any oil. I want to use that thickness of the white. Okay. And pick up a flower or a couple of flowers and just apply, okay, just a little bit still thicker. If some of the earlier layers were gently runny, you need to be more careful of being able to leave paint. Yeah, it might start kind of sliming away. So I'm going to introduce maybe a border of white little petals, just a light, just catching through. Maybe one of the flowers will have a side light to how the petals bent on one way, and let's allow the light through the other way. Might just do it here on the side. So again, just to give you an idea what's happening. Might put a tiny little mark. It's quite three-dimensional stroke, that is. Just in the air here. And then I might just put a little more somewhere here. Okay. So they're grouped up. Not just all in one. Maybe a couple of more here. So that's just gives me more now an impression of how it's possibility of how it will be. Lovely chunks of thick paint playing on that light. That's lovely. That was really nice. Now I could keep on going and going and going, but I haven't painted my rocks. I haven't painted my greens, so I might paint somewhere where I need other colors, so I can finish it off like that after. But I'm going to stop at my flowers and come back to my lighter rocks. Right, I'm back to my warmer brush. Well, the brush I used to mix my warmer colors. And I'm going to fill now some of the gaps here and paint behind my flowers. I want to find a little bit darker browny color. So maybe some ochre and maybe a little bit of violet. Maybe a little dab of rose madder to make it warmer rather than yellowish, more towards the red than just yellowish ochre. So tiny bit of that here. And I'm going to work with my brush, almost like, the diagonal of the board of the rock we were establishing. So it might be a similar diagonal, the patterns of color peeling off some of the mosses, exposing some of the fresh part of the rock. So a little bit of almost like scribbles. Okay, little things here. They don't have to have too many sharp borders. They could have some sharp borders, but maybe not everywhere because they're just tiny bit out of our focal point. We want to keep our flowers in the focal point. Okay, maybe tiny bit more darker here as the rock is slowly started to turn around. Maybe not overly dark. It's not into that gradient of most dark uh, tones. So maybe something here. I'm also mixing kind of I'm applying the color and it mixes with my background blue-gray, whatever that mixture was, that buff titanium. Yeah, I think maybe this stem might be slightly relocated, so I might just paint over it here as well. Tiny bit more darkness from the violet. For me, I might just paint a little bit more behind my flowers to give them some of the background before the greens will come in. To cover some of the initial background gray. Okay, might just be just enough to bring across. And nothing wrong with exposing part of the rock. On the photograph, we see the green coming up almost like a straight wall of green. I might break it down a little with exposed rock, shape of the rock there. Same like I'll be painting the sea through the flowers shortly as well. Right. Anything for the rocks in the distance? I think we can go for a small amount of Payne's Grey. Okay, that's quite a lot of Payne's Grey. So let me perhaps mix it with my buff titanium a little. Again, let's test it against my surface. Now it's almost the same darkness as my initial grey background, but this is a little bit warmer. And it also gives me an opportunity to paint it over. If I overpainted my light here, yeah, maybe create some more texture. Maybe a little bit of variety. And just try to not to over copy the same strokes. Maybe cluster them more. Okay. Good. Any other pale above titanium type of strokes behind my flowers on the border as we tidying things up? Maybe some of that will come through a little more. Might be more exposed, lighter rocks. Okay, so now I'm painting somewhere in between the flowers. At the moment it just looks a color coming through almost like in petal-like shapes. But when the gray background will disappear, we'll hopefully see it through, uniting the light here. Okay. I think that might be a little too patchy, so I might paint some of it a little calmer. At any point, if we're working on the small areas like this, there are lots of details, and we over paint it. It just looks too busy. We can't quite see them. Kind of don't fill the area too many details or too simplified. You can always take the paint off and give it another go and never be scared of it. Okay, I think for the moment that might be enough. What I could do is tiny bit more dark area in that little border. So I'm gonna go for Payne's Gray, maybe blue gray. Blue gray is a bit too light, so more Payne's Gray, maybe a dab of ultramarine. I just want a slightly darker, sharper border between, well, that's not so much a border, a little contrast here for the lower part of these lighter rocks. And I want them to be part of that environment, not just have a precise shape. Okay, I think that's better. Okay. Say maybe somewhere here I might introduce just a little bit of unevenness within our rock. Okay, it might just blend with some of the browns, make little imperfections. Some of those darker browns could be supported with that extra tone, darker bluish gray. And I'm just, as I'm introducing the color, I'm smudging it as well. And maybe stop. Okay. And as I started doing this darker tone, I think I'm going to go for my darker rocks. And maybe even my mountains, my cliffs, the rocky areas of the opposite shore. So that's worked really well with ultramarine and Payne's Gray, some of the shadows. Maybe more intensive dark, maybe something like 8 coming close to 9. Okay, if I'll put a 9 straight away, it might just jump out. So some of those shadows will be lovely. My lower part here. Alizarin Crimson will be lovely to use now as well for medium darknesses. But I haven't got it on my palette. Okay, that might be somewhere there. There might be another darker rock behind the flowers. I can just about see one there. So if you have a chance of painting another darker pattern and it's not on the way of any flowers, bring it in. If you're not sure, put a little darker tone mark, and then as the painting develops, you might decide it's too much and we can remove it. Okay. Some of that darker wave we were painting, I think it will have a little bit of darkness, maybe not as much as that very dark tone, but maybe somewhere in that line might have a little more connection to rocks under the water. Okay. And I'm going to start adding, I think I might go for, as I've run out of my magenta, sorry, rose madder, I think I'm going to squeeze a little bit of alizarin crimson. And it mixes really, really well with Payne's Grey for some extra darker colors. So I'm wiping my paint of that black bluey gray dark version of it. I'm wiping my brush from all the thick paint off. Tiny bit of oil. I'm gonna go for my alizarin crimson, and I'm gonna go for Payne's Grey. Okay, a little bit more alizarin crimson. Okay, it should be dominating the color, and I'm gonna get a small amount of white, small enough to okay, that's quite runny. Don't want it runny, so it means that I need to wipe my kind of amend the viscosity of paint. So thicker paint from red and black, thicker paint from white. That's the same color, but that one is runny and this is more solid. One will be very transparent and patchy. One will be much more solid in its appearance. So that's going to be my lighter parts of the rock. I might even make some of them paler in a moment or two, but that will be my overall lighter surfaces of the rock. Okay, that's appeared too dark. So I need a little more white. And I could have a very, very, very small amount of ochre, which will make the colors tiny bit more lighter because there is white in ochre. And it will also, okay, that's good, but I wanted more pink than orange. I'm mainly painting it, kind of painting, repainting it over my warmer strokes without going into my cooler ones. That will keep the warmer part of the highlights of the rock more defined from the shadows. Okay, I'm just exposing it a little. Still quite dark. It is still quite dark. Okay, if that is the case, I can wipe my brush off. I can pick up my palette knife. I can just take that thickness of the paint. Okay, clean it up. So the thickness of the paint is gone. So it will be easier for me to apply fresher color. So hopefully it's not going to be overwhelmed with that darkness. Let's try this one now. Okay, that's too light now. A little bit too light. It's fine balance. Don't be scared of taking your time mixing those darknesses, lights. Okay, now I'm going to pick up some color from what's left and then stain slightly darker. That's better. Kind of balance itself off. And we do an interpretation of the light. It's not precise definition of it. It's approximate, what feels a little bit lighter, what feels a little bit darker. And I'm also differentiating it through warmer, lighter, warmer, darker equals a bit more cooler. I might just soften some of these borders with those lit up rocks as well. the kind of smudgy. Okay. Smudgy suggestive. Tiny bit more contrast, which I'm ready to touch. Okay, just come out a little too. Boring. Less. I wanted to have a connection between my shadows and can't just keep wiping my brush so I can narrow this shadow of a line. Maybe just a little. Okay, that just looks silly. Okay, that's something more there without too much details. Maybe a lighter tone will come here as well. And if it's not through buff titanium, it could also come through bluey gray. That's where buff titanium and bluey gray is exciting paints to use. You can apply them more or less straight away and they interact really well as a pure color because they are pre-mixed ingredients. Right, let's stop at that. Maybe I'm over focusing on such a small element here. Let's think about our greens. Something exciting started to happen midway here, yeah? Let's block some greens. Let's paint the sea. Oh yes, we want to do those darker mountains while we're in these colors. Right, let's do that quickly. We already have our paints gray and crimson. This time we can go for more runnier paint. Okay. And I'm going to block that ridge. It appears sharp first. I'm just applying the color. I don't want it to be all the same from one end to another. So if I applied a little bit of the same color, then wipe my brush. Okay, can I find a similar color elsewhere here? Perhaps. Okay. Now, can I add a hint of blue-gray in darker version where I mix Payne's gray and ultramarine with a tiny bit of white? I still got a little bit more on my palette, so maybe some of that border could merge with that earlier red and gray. You can also chop into your flower a little, so when you paint more fresher petals, you will have even better border there. Okay, can we go a tiny bit more stronger into ultramarine so the colors are not just all super dull. Still not direct ultramarine, but it might have a little more color showing. Maybe here at the base of this exposed rocky area. Okay, I'm painting just a little bit over the water so my horizon line, the straightness is gone. I'll come back to that. Okay, and I'll have a tiny bit of a darker border for the shoreline. That's okay. Yeah, that's well. I'll clean it up with the color of the water after. Right, I'm wiping my brush. And can I gently touch my rocks and combine? You can see I've got a sharper border here. Just gonna combine that little border with a softer stroke. and anything above, any other lines around that area here. So any softer, okay, that's quite a sharp contrast. Small amounts of it, as we said, is not a big deal. Okay, that's better. Even introducing another little color above. Okay, sometimes a bit of finger painting, smudging into things. Okay, maybe a little border. You can pick up all your paler blue, or just go mid-stroke between the darker color and your sky. Okay, it just gives us that softer, out of focus, playful feel. Okay, let's just do it a little more this way as well. And for the lower part, I'm going to add a small amount of ochre to my reddish, that red and Payne's grey, maybe a tiny bit of buff titanium. Okay, that's come out a little light, so again, maybe a small amount of alizarin crimson. Okay, and I'm going to blend that. Okay, that's too light, a little bit too light, and a little bit too orange. Maybe a dab of violet and a dab of buff titanium or even white to make it more duller rather than ochre yellow. That's more duller? Not really. Okay, what can I do there? Maybe a small amount of blue to calm it down. Okay, so that's there, but it's too light. Okay, keep on going. Tiny bit of violet back to that. Maybe tiny bit of stronger blue, bit back to that. It's still staying within my color because I had quite a lot of it on my brush, but that's feeling a bit better now. Okay, that's better. Okay, so I'm just smudging alongside here. In between the flowers, painting over my less successful color. A little bit of a diagonal direction of shapes as well. You know, the coastal line, slightly more diagonal, showing the terrain, the angles of the terrain. Without painting the water, we're more or less on the right darkness of it. So it appears it's kind of could hold on a bit longer to wait it without the correct color. I think we're ready to start bringing our greens. Right, for the greens, our plants, so the stalks and leaves, I'm going to use a runny paint. This is just the color I had on my brush from our mountains, so I haven't quite cleaned it. But we're going to be using that ochre with our green anyway, so don't have to be cleaned. Emerald green, ochre. Okay, that's quite a light color. I'm going to make it partially light, and I'm going to make a partially darker, a little bit more cooler color as well. So I'm going to use this Renier paint just to do a bit of blocking, okay? A little bit of planning, maybe directions of stems, especially where we haven't touched the color of the background yet. So it'll be easier for you to apply it in that manner of a bit more vertical lines. Okay. Maybe less successful to apply thinner layer over thicker strokes, but I might just give it a little go and see how it will look. Okay. And then I'm going to add darker colors, so back to emerald green and some Payne's gray, or actually violet. Let's go for a bit of violet. Payne's gray, sorry, emerald green and a bit of violet. Again, quite runny with oil. And I'm going to again continue working with my partially vertical lines, partially kind of elongated scribbles. If we'll leave some of the gray background here and there, that's okay. It will support all our leftover gaps. Okay. Now my brush, because I'm using quite runny paint, it started to split quite a lot. You might just about to start seeing it's from a finer, narrow edge. It started to give me less pleasant streaks. It's good to have a little bit of texture from a brush, but at some point I will swap it. Okay, slightly changing diagonals as well. Maybe introducing a little blocks of color, then to stretched out lines. Sometimes stretched out is harder as well to create everywhere. Okay, so that's looking good here. Okay. There's very rough application of lighter green and darker green, but with more precise brush, more finer brush, I can start using some thicker paint of the green and tweak some of those leaves and stems. Let's go for thicker white, a little bit of ochre, a little bit of emerald green. I think I haven't used any oil. If there is a little bit of oil on my palette, that might be enough just to keep the oil mixing together, the colors mixing, integrating between each other. But I want to have that thickness of the stroke available to me, because we can start adding a bit of stems. The lighter color for the stems will work anywhere we want to go over our flowers, kind of over the pink heads, or if we're working somewhere over dark background. Okay, if you paint it over a light background, we just simply lose it. Okay, so things like that will start just slightly separating into something light and darker. They might have little, the leaves, they're the stems, they're very elongated. Very elongated leaves. They almost like stems all the way through in that pattern. So I'm introducing those paler strokes, almost like a little rhythm of branches, yeah, reaching out. So I'm softening that initial sharper, more abrupt direction of the greens. Okay, that's a bit better now. Maybe some a little bit more thicker strokes, just to show a little more paler green about. On the other hand, there will be more darker greens here as well. Okay, little suggestions. Now, these little suggestions could have suggestions of highlights on the stalks and leaves, could have tiny bit more light. I'm using small amount of yellow, sorry, yellow ochre and a small amount of white. And on top of some of these stems, I might just put a little dab, maybe a little dot, maybe a little elongated stretch. Okay, just need to get my paint on the tip of my brush, otherwise it's too thick to apply. Again, it's not going to be everywhere, but in some places it will just get enough little extra. Elongates our stems, gives them depth. They start to pop out a tiny bit more. And when we paint the petals on the flowers, we'll know if we even want to add more fresher light color. I'm just going tiny bit more whitish. Again, just a little tester for the checks. Yeah, that gives it just a little extra bits. Okay. Right, that's good. It also gives us that extra sharpness of contrast. We want that focal point there. Good, right. I'm gonna go for more darker tone as well. My violet and my emerald green. Maybe started without any white. I want to continue some linear work. We'll also will naturally pick up lighter tones on this area as we painted the rocks, we painted the flowers, we painted a bit of background. So that emerald green and violet will pick up lighter paint on the way. So in a way I might keep reloading my brush to have some darkness present. Okay, I need to be careful. I start looking a bit patchy. I like that more solid area than this patchy area. So can I turn it to more darker, bigger group? Okay, that's already started to look better. Moment I grouped it up. And if it's too big area, I can always break it down with thinner, lighter green. Okay, that's why I just established a little shadow without planning it too much. Okay. Anything else in this area? That's where some of the individual stems might be visible. I know we haven't painted the sea here yet. But we can paint in between the stems. So it's suggestive, but still sharp. We will make it sharper by painting more whites in the area. So don't over worry. And next darker areas of that green, I'm just going to go for mainly my violet. It's been mixed in with my green, but it's mainly violet. I'm going to paint on top of some of my darker greens to deepen the shadows, and it will mix with green, so the violet will not just sit there on its own, but it will deepen a few corners, make it varied. And now I'm also following some of the directions of the stems. Okay, that looks a little too wobbly. Just redirecting a few things so they're not too similar. That's good. Okay, I'm happy with that. Even if we will not add any more, we have enough contrasts of lighter and darker greens already present. We can tweak it more, but I'm gonna do a couple of more strokes and stop and work on my finishing touches of the sea and flowers. These marks are becoming very exciting, actually. Now those little violet happy dots. Okay, they will start linking to shapes of darks. I think I might do a couple of those little happy dots, full stops around flowers. Gives that little, almost like punctuation, little full stops, little catches of breath. Okay. Right, the sea. Right, the sea. So I've just spotted something on my mountain here, which I might need to smudge. I think it must be a different angle or just gently dried or something. Start to come out. Okay, that's better. Right, it's the sea. I still got my cool brush, tiny bit of oil. I'm gonna start with my blue-gray as a base. Now our sea, I will also need a small amount of emerald green. So with blue-gray, that will come out nicely to show beautiful depths. If you didn't have blue-gray, just put a bit of cerulean blue and some white. Even without Payne's gray, it probably will look quite nice. Just gonna test it out next to my earlier blue lines. Look how it almost gives that beautiful shine. I might just make it tiny, tiny, tiny bit darker. A little more green, a little bit more cerulean blue. Okay, that's a bit better as well. Okay, I'm tidying up my coastal line, my horizon line. I had some darker marks there, that's why I'm going for pure green and blue, so it picks up bits of gray in there as well. Okay, and I'm going to start merging it with small amounts of ultramarine and a little extra white or any other blue-gray, whichever you might have. Okay, and that color is started to come up a little closer to our flowers. And anyway you wanted to paint behind your flowers, might be easier if you were to paint that turquoise color. So I'm back to a bit of white and emerald green, because the blue might be a little bit lost and bit behind our flowers. The turquoise will stand out bolder, and we want the bolder contrast next to flowers. So I'm going to find little gaps, suggestions of where the water might be shown. I think I painted way more flowers than I see on the photograph, but they cluster quite well. So if I'll introduce a little bit of the turquoise here, that starts to show a bit more. It also separates my stalks. I'm just doing strokes of turquoise and it creates the stalks. Okay, maybe slightly lighter version of this turquoise over it, mainly on top of my patterns. It will show a slight extra light, not dependent from the flower head's proximity. It's behind them, so that's looking stronger as a bit of water. Okay, that's better. Can I make one of them slightly lower? Maybe this flower is a little lower. Maybe this is simplified as a shape as well. Okay, that's better. Something smudged. Let's smudge it without an extra vertical line. And I'm not sure about this flower. Maybe I'll break it down into two. That's looking better. Okay, right, again, coastal line tidied up. And then anything else need to be painted over where gray's not been touched. Can go in between our lines. We can come close to our rocky area, rocks. Any sharp borders, again, we can partially soften. We're coming closer to the flowers, so that's where it could remain gently stronger if required, but still paler altogether. Okay. And I'm going to use slightly lighter color. Again, as we're coming close to the shore, I'm going to use tiny bit more white, very little oil. It's that thick paint. So I think somewhere here I'm going to introduce small texture for the waves or that running up surf. Just dragging the lighter strokes through. Like we were painting the clouds, just gently paler color coming in, overlapping previous layers. Okay, that's looking good. A little bit reflecting here, so I might put more of that stroke. Okay, that's good. Good, 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 good. Anything else here? Okay, some of my strokes of the water and shoreline are becoming too similar. Where I was painting them. Where's that cooler color? Maybe warmer color. Returning here will simplify shapes as well. Okay, not too sure about this corner. I'm gonna let it be for now and keep it simplified. Right, now I want to touch up my flowers now with some fresh whites. Exactly the same as we've done earlier, but a bit more confidently in some key areas. Okay, overlapping our greens, overlapping our pinks. Opaque, impasto strokes, so it means chunks of paint. Keep topping up the brush. Keep the paint on the tip of the brush, so then you can place it strategically. Put a couple of strokes, step away. See the whole form of the flower or just a group of flowers, and see the form of the highlights instead of oh, this petal got two highlights and this one's got three. Let's even them up. See it as a whole group together. That's how we'll start propping some flowers, putting some of them at the back, some of them at the front. Okay, I'm not sure about these ones, so let's vary them. When I'm saying, oh, I'm not sure about this area, or I'm not sure about this petal, it doesn't mean that everything is wrong. It means that maybe the stroke was less successful, that grouping need changing, or some minor adjustment usually is enough. Um, okay, this has started to happen much more cheerful and exciting. This is lovely empty area where I think some of the fresh whites could just come in and interpret missing flower. Okay, this might not have much anymore here. Okay, anything else here? Good, maybe for the top row of flowers that might be enough. Let's have a look at the lower row, maybe against the lighter rocks to have some stronger colors. Now my white's gone all mucky. Might go for this fresh white because there's so much color on my painting. I just keep bringing it back to my fresh white. Okay, I'm quite happy to keep this group without any white, without any additional white. And this one might have a little bit here. A little bit more in the middle. And maybe not fresh white, but as it comes. Okay, anything else? Just overlooking the whole painting. Think around this edge. Little contrasts of white will be beneficial as well. I think we're getting there. I'm still missing a little more highlights on my greens, I think. Maybe some more of things like this will be better. Anything else? Right, my line of my shoreline, my horizon line of distance. Let's tweak that very minor forgotten element. Okay, that's good. And also, when I'll have my painting a little more horizontal, well, vertical to me, sorry, not horizontal to me, vertical to me, 90 degrees to me. At the moment it's under an angle and I'm struggling to see reflective line and the coastal line, that dark little edge, if it's straight or not. Might just tweak that when I'm off screen if needed. And I'd like to put tiny bit more definition here. I think probably that type of paler rocks somewhere here. If it's too much paint, another option for us is to add paint when it's dry. You know what? I wanted to put tiny bit of yellowish color here as well. Ooh, let's have tiny bit of our ochre with tiny bit of buff titanium as it is. I think we can just cheer that area up. Look at that. Buff titanium just makes your ochre less, it's still opaque, the ochre on itself, but it will make it even more opaque, so you can go over some of the patterns. That's getting a lovely strong contrast. I'm liking that. Maybe that's where it's also will create more tension under some of the grasses here. Otherwise it was looking a little bit of a dull area. Okay, that's suggesting the color direction, and it's also separate this rock from the rock at the back. So when I make it a little paler, I think that will work well. Much more happy with that already. And the work is always matures the following day. So never be scared to leave it and come back and reevaluate what you've done and continue seeing it in a new light. Right, I'm going to stop at this for today. I think I'm 95% there, and I'm happy with that. And I'll look forward to see your work. Thank you so much for painting alongside of me today. Thank you.